Everyone. I'm Dr. Ruth Utzmore, and I live in Savannah, Georgia, and I'm really happy to be here. So Colleen, you want me to go straight into my books? Okay, so I recommended two books. They're both professional, but one's more of a textbook and one is not. So I'm going to start with a book called A Child Called It, and it's by Dave Pelzer. And I had the opportunity to see him as a keynote speaker. But Dave Pelzer, the book is about, and it's a hard read, I'm not going to lie. So, like, be aware of triggers and things like that. But it was about the horrendous child abuse that he experienced. And in the state of California, to this day, they still consider it the worst case of child abuse that they've ever seen in the state of California. But the book talks about his whole, like, what he experienced, but also how the resilience that you think, how could he endure this and still, it talks about like the struggle that he had, still wanting to bond with his mother, and then the resilience that he developed with that. He's got several others, Boy Named Dave and some other books, but Dave Pelzer, he's phenomenal, became to be a keynote, like a professional speaker, even though he stuttered previously and all of that. But it's a book about severe trauma. So like I said, there's some serious triggers, but it's amazing to see how, like, talk about the development of resilience and things. And if you look at all of the books that he's written, that's just the beginning of those. And then the next one, so on a lighter note, I do a lot with play therapy, and I've done a lot of work, I'm active in the Association for Play Therapy, but The Art of the Relationship by Gary Landreth. And, you'll see that there have been multiple editions of that. But that is, if you just want to know the nuts and bolts of non-directive, child-centered, what we call child-centered play therapy, if you think about Rogerian or person-centered theory is to adults, this is what it's child-centered, what is to children. And The Art of the Relationship is an easy read. It's kind of got a textbook feel, but it walks you through how to set up a playroom, how to track, how to reflect, how to do those things. So it doesn't mean that you read the book and you're a play therapist, but it really does give you a very good foundation of what play therapy is about and how that works. So two books. One is just of understanding severe child trauma and how resilience can develop, but also here's The Art of the Relationship of, now this is what we do to help these children who've experienced it when they don't have the words to express that trauma. How do we do that with kids with limited verbal and cognitive abilities?
Great. Thank you, Dr. Moore. Dr. Harris, you're next on my list.
I knew you were going to call me like as soon as I stood up. So
sorry, I sense it.
Yeah. So a couple of books I've been reading lately. One of them has been, I've been going back reading a lot of a lady by the name of Ruby Payne. She has a book called A Framework to Understanding Poverty. And she writes a lot about systems and poverty. And it's one of my favorite books. And she talks, and so that's one of my favorite books. And I am also reading a book by Robin DiAngelo, and it's called White Fragility. And so she has a series, and so I've been reading that lately, and with some of a lot of trauma-informed work, a lot of multicultural diversity work I've been doing, and so that's what I've been reading lately.
Great, thank you. Dr. Dixon.
Hello, I'm Dr. Dixon, the DCT. Thinking about books here, I've got, I have a lot, but so let's go with school-related ones. About like probably gosh, probably 30 years ago. I read a book by, and I read it a lot on occasion, by Thomas Kuhn called Scientific, oh gosh, it's something on the title. So basically it's scientific revolutions and why science, why in our field do we chase the topics that we chase, do the things we do, and why do like topics go in and out of vogue and things like that. And he bases a lot on biology and like engineering, but it works really well in understanding psychology as well. And then as far as maybe a second book, I think it's super important, and I read these a lot. I can't remember how many of them I have, but any original works that I can get my hands on that have to do with psychology or sociology or psychiatry in our field. I love to read just as close to a first edition of things that I can find. I'm also one of those people, I don't like to, if I can't find a really good first edition, I don't really like to read the front or back matter or any of that stuff. I'll start with chapter 1 and I won't read anyone's opinion about it when I pick up a book. So I make my own opinions. So those would be some of the ones I often read.
Great, thank you. Dr. Pickens.
Hello, everybody. I'm Dr. Brian Pickens. In terms of, I take recommending books really seriously. I always give books for Christmas. And so I was sitting in front of my bookshelf today trying to figure out what book I would recommend for counselors who are just starting. And so I have two. The first one has a caveat, it's Kotler's On Being a Therapist. I would suggest writing it on your list to get, and then get it a couple years after you've been practicing and then read it, or get it now, read it, and then read it again. The context of having practice under your belt fundamentally changes the way you perceive the text, I think. And so I'm always been interested in how the counseling process changes the therapist, how the counseling process impacts who we are, how we keep ourselves, how something that's so personal, that requires so much of ourselves to be put into it, and that at the same time we have to keep ourselves at a distance to remain professional. And the book talks a lot about those types of things. It's just fantastic. I had to read it in my doctoral program, so I'd recommend reading it now and reading it again, or waiting till later. The other one that is kind of adjacent to that is my background is working with lots of rural communities, highly impoverished communities, and ones that require a lot of creative thinking to provide funding so that they can access services. And so I have Writing for a Good Cause by Barbado and Furlick, which is just a really good primer on how to write a grant proposal. Working in community mental health, if you work with impoverished communities, you will many times be placed in the role to have to creatively think how you're going to get funding to support the community you're working with. So
great, thank you. Awesome. Dr. Crowley.
Thank you, Colleen. So I chose two books. One is specific to your, sorry, accidentally muted myself. I specifically assigned this book to clinical interns that I have that are working towards licensure. It's also a Kotler book, so interesting that I would follow Dr. Pickens with that. It's called the Therapist Workbook. And I encourage my clinical trainees to work through it on their own, as it requires a lot of self-reflection, and then bring that information back into the supervisory session so that we can talk about sort of what they're learning about themselves through their clinical experience. I would say for our fieldwork students, go ahead and get it now, but I would wait until after you're done the program before you start on it, because it does help to have a little bit of clinical experience under your belt before you start on the book. And then I also picked a second book. which I recommend to a lot of individuals. I would love to incorporate it into our human sexuality class when I teach it. So I do speak about it some in our human sexuality class. But this is a book by Dr. Emily Nagoski, and it's called you can't really see it with my background. It's called Come As You Are. And it's just a wonderful resource from a feminist perspective on looking at the female orgasm and how to improve women's sex life. And I think given the climate of our country, sometimes this is a topic that is often overlooked and not discussed, yet can feel safe through a book versus some open conversation. So I think it's just a wonderful book for anyone to read, to really understand sort of the oppression that women have experienced sexually in our country, and how they can better reclaim that.
Thank you very much. Dr. Clark.
Hey everyone, Dr. Clark here. I didn't know we had the option to provide two, so like I feel bad now. Like I do read, I just have one. I read more than one.
I said
though.
one. I guess if
I
no one
mean,
could choose, so you
I'm
actually
feeling
win.
self-conscious, Colleen. Okay, so I will provide two to show I read. But so the first thing, it's actually funny I'm talking this way because you come across a book sometimes that just rocks you, like you feel like it was like personal, like they made it for you. And something that I feel really passionate about, I've done speaking on stuff on, and it's toxic shame. And so Brene Brown is obviously a big favorite for me, but even before Brene Brown talked in her TED Talks about shame and the toxicity of shame. This book called Healing the Shame That Binds You by John Bradshaw. It is very, very well written to describe how at the core of a lot of issues, codependency, addiction, Superman complex, doing perfection, right, is shame, right? And the feeling that you're not good enough and you don't deserve enough, right? So anyway, an amazing book. I recommend it to clients a lot. It's just a great book to have in your repertoire. Healing the Shame That Binds You. And then secondly, I work a lot with kids and teens. Love Dr. Moore's recommendation, definitely ditto that, but also Dan Siegel, you may know his work. He recently came out with a book called Brainstorm, and well, semi-recently, and it talks a lot about the teenage brain and it explains it in a really digestible way. So if you have any interest in working with teenagers and young people, it's a really, really good book that really helps people understand like what's going on in the developing brain and how to translate that into clinical practice. So neuroscience related book called Brainstorm. So those are my two. I do read. Thank you.
Great. That was never the question. All right, so we're gonna do Dr. Erickson and then Dr. Eldridge, or two E's back to back.
Okay. All right, Dr. Clark, I am gonna stick with just giving one book, so don't feel badly. So the book that I'm gonna recommend is for when you're already practicing. It's The Mood Cure. I work with a lot of teens, and there are many times that the parents will come in and they'll say, we just don't want to medicate our child. We don't want to do that. And so this book, I can tell you, there are more parents that love this book than you would imagine, because based on their diet, they give you a quiz in there, a mood quiz. And then based on those answers, then Julia has put together these diets and these supplements that you can take that will help your mood, depending on what that is. And so I highly recommend this book. It's probably one of the most recommended books that I have in my library. So I'll say it again, The Mood Cure by Julia Ross.
Thank you. And unfortunately, this is excitingly taking longer than expected. So I will ask everyone to just give one moving forward. But again, we'll compose a full list and post it.
Okay, I think I'm up next, and my one book above all others would be What Happened to You by Dr. Bruce Perry and Oprah Winfrey. And it is excellent both as a book that you read with your eyes as well as a book that you read with your ears. Really talks from a neurobiological framework that's so easy to follow about how our early experiences and even intergenerational experiences impact our development and our experience of trauma and traumatic stress. So highly recommend that one.
Great, thank you. Dr. McCormick and then Dr. Dalton.
Okay, everyone. Hi. So my recommendation for those of you who have had me or who know anything about me in my clinical practice, I love EMDR therapy. I'm an EMDR certified therapist. It's my area of clinical specialty. I absolutely love EMDR. So my book recommendation is the ER Basic Practices and Principles book by Francine Shapiro. It is a really great text that just sort of walks you through the 3-pronged protocol, the 8 phases, and so on, and gives you a good general sort of overview of what EMDR therapy is, how it came to be, and what it looks like. And for any of you who are interested in getting trained in EMDR later on down the line, for most trainings, you're required to read it before you start the training. So you can get a head start.
Thank you.
I'm Dr. Dalton. My book that I picked is Principles and Practice of Sex Therapy. It's a textbook, but it covers like a lot of issues related to sex therapy. I feel like it's a good place to start if you're interested. I did get swayed by everyone giving all their textbooks, and now I have a stack here. So if you want more suggestions, I'll give them to you, but this is a good one to start with. And it's by Hall and Binnick.
Thank you so much, Dr. Troutman and Dr. Van Meter.
God, I love the whole randomness of this. I picked, wow, I just blanked. Love's Executioner by Irvin Yalom. I'm a huge existentialist, and while we want to make change in people's lives, sometimes we have to either deliver the news or ground them in something that they don't want to admit and they don't want to see as a reality. So it kind of changes the script a little bit on just strength-based, and instead it goes to, well, your client kind of needs to hear this in order to move forward. So I'm a huge existentialist, and I think that really works well to also understand that while we do some awesome work, sometimes we have to bring our clients to a reality that they're not ready for. So that was mine, and I'll resist the peer pressure to suggest a second book.
Dr. Van Meter, if you're available.
Yeah, sorry.
That's okay.
Okay, so this is really hard because everybody said so many good books. I want to choose one that's different, even though I am a trauma therapist. So anything with trauma is sort of my jam. But I just recently finished a new book and I love it. And it's called The Gift of Fear. And it's been out for a while, but it's by Gavin de Becker. And it is amazing. And it's about really talking about intuition and how it works in that investigative sort of space in the body and in the mind, and you know, like how it works and how we second guess ourselves and our intuition and how that works with trauma as well. So it's really, really a great book. It's really awesome.
Thank you. And last but not least, we have Dr. Colarusso and then Dr. Rush Wilson.
So one of my favorite books that I read when I was in grad school and in moving into fieldwork is The Making of a Therapist. And I think it really kind of aligns with what you're doing. And it kind of makes you feel like, even though you're not really sure, it helps you kind of be like, yes, this is what you should be doing. So that is my recommendation. And I will stick with one.
All right, thank you, Dr. Colarusso. Thank you, Colleen, too. The book that I chose really quickly is Not All Black Girls Know How to Eat, A Story of Bulimia, and it aligns with my specialty area, one of the two, which is eating disorders, particularly eating disorders in non-focused populations. And there we go.
All right, and I'm here. This is Dr. Mike. I'm hiding in the background, so y'all didn't see me there. But I'll just throw one out there really quickly. It's a classic. It's Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. When you talk about existentialism, if you don't know much about Viktor Frankl, you probably should from theories. I would highly recommend just Google quotes by Viktor Frankl, and it'll give you an idea of this man's background, his story, you know, how he came with some of his existential ideas. So Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning is a must for everybody.
Thank you. Sorry, everybody's sneaking in. Dr. Chanel Robbins, and then Dr. Scott Lipp as well.
Hello, I'm Dr. Chanel Robinson. I've actually posted mine in the chat, but I selected Adult Children of Emotional Immature Parents. I think this is a great resource, just a couple of psychoeducation on attachment styles. So a lot of times we review that with clients who are struggling or have parents who were neglectful. So this would be a great resource for your clients to explore with you in session or just do independently on their own.
Hi, everyone. Dr. Scott Lipp here. And so the book that I will share is 72 Hour Hold by B.B. Moore Campbell. Fascinating read. It really just, it's very riveting. It almost reads like a true thriller, and it's a deep dive into the community mental health system. And it's an area that I got my training in and really gave me good insight and information into that part of our field. So check it out, B.B. Moore Campbell, 72 Hour Hold.
Fantastic. Thank you to all of our faculty. Those are our full-time faculty. We didn't even have a chance to feature adjunct opinions, but we still have an ask out. So if they do add to the list, we'll add that. And again, get that posted in the online forum. So really quickly, before we turn it over to David Sibley, our university librarian, I will request that all students on the call make sure you meet with your faculty advisors in the next couple of weeks and get your course schedules updated and added to the advising forum if you have not yet done so. Really important for fall 2 and future term schedules to make sure you're scheduled correctly. With that being said, David Sibley, thank you so much for your patience, and we look forward to your presentation.
Yeah, thanks, Colleen, for inviting me. I'm actually really excited. Some of those notebooks I actually notated for myself. So for those who haven't seen my face before, which might be many of you, my name is David Sibley. I'm the university librarian. Like many of you, I actually I'm very excited. This town hall coincides with my time of night where I work on my literature review for my dissertation. So I don't have to work on my literature review for like the next half hour, and I'm very excited about it. Some of you will understand that someday. With that, so my dissertation or my research, I'm in an educational psychology program, so I get really excited to learn new things. If anyone wants to add anything to their list, I also recommend Edward Deci's Why We Do What We Do, just because I'm a self-determination person. So I am going to go ahead and share my screen, which I just realized I didn't click. Bear with me, everyone. You are all seeing me also post my last coffee like 3 hours ago. So all of my energy pretty much is like disappearing as we speak. And there's my screen. Hopefully I'm sharing the right one and not showing you my citation manager with like the 300 different references that are in there that will stress anybody out. So I just want to walk you through a couple of things that are resources that are available to you through the library, answer any questions that you have, because I like to hear questions and answer them because I can talk for hours on end if anyone lets me. But I also, you might have specific questions, and I always like to try and answer since you're all going to be using the library resources a lot. or you should be using the library resources a lot. With that, the first thing I always like to just double check, because there is no wrong answer. And when you're in the room with a librarian, it is a no judgment zone. And that like transfers over to Zoom. So the first thing I always like to do is just make sure that everyone knows how to find the library website. And I mean, no matter what, I'm going to show you anyway, so it's really kind of a moot question on my part. But anyway, I like to say that finding the library is pretty straightforward. There's a phrase that all the roads lead to Rome. I like to say on the TCSPP side, all web pages somehow lead to the library. So if you're familiar with the community center or community gateway or student gateway, I have like 30 different names for it. You can always find us in the top right corner there. We're also embedded in every page in Canvas in some way, shape, or form. Normally it is in the module section towards the top. You can also find us on the Chicago Schools website at the very bottom there. In the footer, there's a link to the library. And then you can always just remember library.thechicagoschool.edu. Anyway, many different ways to find us. We like to be the center of attention, as many people know about librarians. So on the page here that you are seeing, this is our main landing page. For those who may have been with the Chicago School for a bit longer, you might have noticed that the library got a bit of a fresh coat of paint on the homepage, and a brand new search box that lets you do a couple of new things. So this search box is really, really a great place to start doing any of your research as you go through and do things, just because it lets you search around 97% of all the content that the library subscribes to. Now, as you start doing more in-depth research, or if you are working towards a research project where you have to get more and more specific, this might not be as useful of a tool, and you'll want to go to specific databases in order to find the missing 3% that it may not be able to find. One of the really cool things about this box also is if you punch in an APA citation, it will try to track down that APA citation for you and pop it right up. So it is really handy for that. The really useful thing too that I like to highlight is that you can actually break down the search box here, and you can see and search for just peer-reviewed articles, books, test kits. If you're located to one of the campuses, you were like curious about one of those, you could look at that. You can also take a look at journals, search for specific databases, or search the library website, because libraries are enormous and we throw a lot of information at you. And I am going to apologize. I might have a cat visitor because they're getting obnoxious now. So I'm apologizing in advance. Not that anyone is ever disappointed when a cat surprises anyone on Zoom, but, and I say that as a librarian who's sitting in my cardigan surrounded by his 6 cats. So the other really important thing to know is that the library has built out research guides for every program at the Chicago School. So these research guides are really, really helpful. If you go to counseling and therapy, you'll notice that there's one for clinical mental health counseling, and then counselor education and supervision. If you click into these, what they do is they are a breakdown of different ways to get started with research within your specific program. We give you ideas of good places to start a research if you want to go to a specific database. You can also, if you wanted to take a look, we have, and you haven't been able to get it yet because it's super, super expensive right now. But you could take a look at the DSM-5. The other useful thing is it gives you some background information around some of the books that we have in our virtual collections. One of the ones that's really good to know is the how to stay current. And this allows you to create, it explains how to create different notifications around how to get notified if there's a new article or anything like that. The Google Scholar one's a really good one, since once you graduate, publishers don't let libraries share their electronic resources with alum. So knowing how to use Google Scholar to create alerts to stay abreast of anything that's going on in a specific discipline, you can find all of that information here. So I always like to point those out. Faye Callista, who's our Associate Director of Academic Engagement, were just recently completed updating all of these over the summer, so they are very up to date. The other aspect of what we have to offer, and again, in the research guides, is if you go to the how-to guides up here in the corner, you will actually see some additional things that really that can be really, really helpful. One of the ones I always like to highlight is this guide to searching. And this is all about how to create an online search, whether that is starting basic or getting into more advanced concepts, which you'll probably want to start doing as you progress through your program and as you have more and more research going on. If you're in the CES program, you're probably going to want to get more specific, since you'll have a dissertation you'll want it to work on at some point. And so this is a really, really great resource. It also breaks down like different things you might hear us say, like what is, when you hear Boolean searching, what is a Boolean search? And that's where you see things like and, or not. And I'm going to demonstrate very briefly how to do one of those searches, because it's really, really fun. Well, I think it's really fun. Other people can disagree with me. So this is a really great resource. And again, that was under our research guides and under the how-to guides. We also put together some really useful topic guides. If you're looking for additional readings or information around specific topics, this is a growing collection. We try to do these in all of our free time that we have as librarians. So you'll notice that there's a couple here, small but growing. And then again, just your subject guides. So research guides are a really, really great resource that we've tried to put together for everyone. Something else I want to highlight, I'm not going to spend too much time because again, I can talk about this stuff for hours on end, and I don't think anyone wants to hear me talk for the next 3 hours. If you go to Citation Management, we give you a breakdown of different citation management tools, and citation management tools are life-changing, and I highly, highly encourage anyone in a graduate program to use one. There's multiple different options. I myself am a Zotero user, and I know other members of my team in the library like to use RefWorks, which is offered by the library. And then you'll see things like Mendeley, or is another one that's popular. I don't recommend Mendeley ever because it's owned by Elsevier, and Elsevier uses Mendeley to collect personalized data about the people who use it. So that's just me being biased and not liking Elsevier. But there's a number of different tools, and what they do is it lets you organize your references. And just to give you an example of what that might look like, this is my Zotero instance here, where I have all of my references for my dissertation. Well, not necessarily for my dissertation, but all of the references I've been reviewing as part of my literature review process and whittling it down. But you'll notice that there were a lot there. It helps you keep track of them. It also lets you attach your PDFs so that all of your PDFs are attached into one file and backed up and attributed to the right citation information. They can be very life-changing. So I highly recommend you take a look at this page, play around with a couple of the different tools, because they do save you a lot of time and energy as you are working on a bibliography. I like to say that you should never have to do a bibliography, or excuse me, that's my inner historian coming out. I mean your references page by hand. Fun fact about me, my first master's degree is in medieval history, and sometimes I fall back on it. But citations, it saves you a lot of time, especially when you're working with a large amount, because if you're ever doing a literature review, sometimes you can be working with 100+ references, and no one should want to have to do all of those by hand or manually. The other thing that I encourage everyone to do is take advantage of the Meet My Librarians service that we offer. And this is just an opportunity to sit down and meet with a librarian. Librarians are a really, really great resource. And you can see here, there's a couple of different things that we can help with. One of the things that I like to say is if you're, especially if you're a doc student, meet with us early. What we can do is help you create an individualized search strategy to help you find the resources that you need to get a jump on your research topic. It is like one of our things that we love to help people with. And it's really easy. So if I just go back here, if you just go to this page and then click press me for help, it'll take you to this page. And you can make an appointment with any one of us. We do them over Zoom. And what you will see here is we just collect a little information, because one of the things that we do with this service is we personalize each and every one of our sessions to your specific needs. So we're not actually going out and doing like just something super generic. What we're actually doing is we actually spend some time putting together a strategy and taking a look at your subject to see what we can find to help you be effective in your search strategy. So it's a really great resource. I like to say, make friends with us early and often, because we can really help you as you go throughout your program. I'm also trying to keep track of questions in chat. So if I miss your question, note that I can't read and talk at the same time. It's one of my greatest weaknesses. So there is that really great thing. Something else to know is that we have these frequently asked questions section. And I'm only pointing this out because this does pop up every once in a while. And I know finding this information can be really difficult. But if you are curious, you do get discounts through IT for different software, including things like in Vivo. Once you're in a different page, if you're doing a dissertation and you need to do qualitative analysis, you can get a discount through NVivo through IT. The other thing to know is that there's like Microsoft and Dell and Apple discounts. So if you are ever in a situation where your computer breaks down like 3 hours before a paper is due, you can get a discount on a new one. And I'm not going to say that that's happened to me before, but that's definitely happened to me before. So just nice to know that there are discounts you can find. Creating a search is something I like to spend a little bit of time on. I try not to throw too many things at people just because it's a lot of information. But doing a search is relatively straightforward. If I do one search, and I can make life easier for everyone by blowing up the screen a little bit. One of the things I always like to double check is that you are aware that there are a couple of different techniques to help narrow down and broaden your search, and that is using some of those Boolean operators. One of the things you'll notice that I do is I tend to wrap all of my searches in quotes. And if anyone wants to guess why, feel free to throw your answer into the chat, but that's always my question. Does anyone know why I'm using quotation marks around this phrase? If you were guessing it's because it keeps all of these words together in a singular phrase, that is the correct answer. It's what we call exact phrase searching. I like to make it, so I like to say that it's basically telling the system to treat this phrase as one keyword rather than an individual keyword. You'll notice that I tend to do that when I even use a single phrase like education. And that's because for me, I have the tendency to forget to wrap my longer exact search phrase or my phrase like self-determination theory in quotes. So I make sure I use quotes on everything. And if I do this search right now, the way that I have it set up is I'm using that Boolean operator, and I'm doing the start of what is an advanced search in a single search phrase. So you can also do some of this work in what we call the advanced search tools. All of our databases have some interface that's similar to this, and it lets you structure line by line. I don't have the patience to do it that way at all. And so when I'm doing this, I'm doing a sort of advanced search in this search box. And once I click search here, what you'll find is, one, I need to sign in. And then two, it will pop up all of my possible hits here. And one of the things that I have done previously is I locked my filters to more relevant years. So this is all within recent years. One of the important things to keep in mind is when we're talking about trying to do things is you want to try and to find the most recent scholarship on a topic. I always preface that though, that depending on what you are doing for a research paper or research topic, sometimes you need to go back a little bit further because there are seminal works that are absolutely vital in anyone's field. I know that one of our the faculty members mentioned like the Structure of Scientific Revolutions by Thomas Kuhn, and he is like a name that you would need to cite if you're talking about development of theoretical perspectives in specific domains. He is a seminal text that everyone should read for that kind of conversation. And so even though that book was published in 1975 or 1976, it's still very relevant today, so you would want to cite that. There are other names in the field too. So I'm a big fan of self-determination theory. That theory first came around in 1986, and so I would want to cite that original work. So so even though you want to stick to current information, you also need to know when to use older information because it might be seminal work within a given thought or theory. The other thing to know, so you'll notice that I have a number of hits here. If I wanted to narrow down, so right now I searched for everything. So I might be getting books, articles from peer-reviewed journals, newspaper articles, videos. If I wanted to just see the like anything peer-reviewed, I would just want to click on this availability here and click peer-reviewed journals and click applied. And then I would have my hits here narrowed down. And so this is so these search facets can be a really, really powerful tool to narrow down a search. I always think people forget about them. So they're a really great tool to take a look at and utilize as you are doing research. The other thing to keep in mind is that a peer-reviewed journal is oftentimes really, really good because it means that it theoretically means that an article has been vetted by the author of that article. The article has been vetted by the author's peers within a given field. And normally, if you're talking about a journal, so this is the Journal of Educational Psychology here. Normally, if you're submitting an article to there, the people who would be reviewing your article would also be experts in some way, shape, or form of educational psychology or some related discipline. So peer reviewed is good, but again, it's also, so if you look for that, it's good to know. You can also go and search for a journal specifically in Google or something if you want to learn more about their peer reviewed process, because you'll see things like double-blind peer review, which is when you don't know who's reviewing your article and the person who's reviewing your article doesn't know it's you. So that is actually the best peer review process, is when you don't know who's reviewing you and no one knows who you are when you have submitted that. The other thing I can do though, because I don't want to spend the next 30 minutes trolling through different articles here for the 1,500 results I got back. So if I wanted to make this search a little bit stronger, because education is sort of broad, what I could do, because my interest is actually in higher education, so I'm going to change that to just be a little bit more specific. And I also know that higher education is slightly a broad term, but it's also got a ton of synonyms. So I'm going to wrap this phrase right here in parentheses And now I'm going to add in another phrase also wrapped in parentheses. And I have just created this advanced search string here. And it's self-determination theory and higher education. So one of the things to always know about your Boolean operators, when you use and, it's always going to try getting you more specific results. And when you use or, it's going to do the opposite. It's going to give you more. So when you do a search like this, wrapped in parentheses, because this is basically a search sentence is the way to think about it. What I am now telling the system is I am interested in anything that talks about self-determination theory and higher education, to get more specific, or anything that mentions self-determination theory and university. So in this case, I am narrowing down my search results while also blowing them up because I'm adding possible synonyms to my search. And so you'll notice here that I actually started off with more hits now than I did before. So that's really fun. But this is a really, really good search strategy. As you are doing any sort of research project, just know that you want to keep track of all the fun synonyms that you might have in your research topic. And when I use synonyms in terms of searches, I also mean things like self-determination theory is also known as SDT. So SDT would also be a synonym here for an acronym. In this case, when you're doing searches, would also count as a synonym of the actual phrase. One of the questions I also get quite a bit is, how do I place an interlibrary loan request? So one of the things, and I am going to fall back here on my medieval history degree, just because we don't really have as much for medieval history. So I am interested in learning about Anna Karenina. And so I see these hits and we have these results, but what I'm really interested in is in a book chapter. And so I just clicked expand my search. And now it's going to pop up everything that the library doesn't own. So now I'm going to go ahead and look and say, oh, look, here's the book I'm interested in. And I am going to click get a chapter. And I just need to fill out this information here, send it on my way, and within 24 hours, I should have the chapter. You can also do it for articles. And then you would just click get it and then submit, and then you would get an email within that 24-hour period. So once it is digitized by the library that we're borrowing it from, you would get an email automatically with a link to this is how you access this article. So it's really, really easy. And it's very, very fast. We just switched our interlibrary loan provider about a year ago. And so they've done a really great job of getting things, at least articles, to us within 24 hours. Something I always really want people to make sure they know is that you should never have to pay for a scholarly article while you are a student at the Chicago School. If you are doing research and something pops up and it says, hey, you need to pay $60 for this article, there's a couple of things you can do. You can first search the library or use the APA citation in our search box. And if we don't have it, click that expand search. And if it's still not popping up here, just click still didn't find what you need. And then you can manually put in the request information here manually, and then send that to us. And if that doesn't seem to work, just email libraryhelp@thechicagoschool.edu, and we'll see what other methods we can get. It might take a little bit longer than just being able to pay the $60 and having instantaneous access. But I also don't like having anyone have to pay for an article that we might be able to get through our relationships with other libraries. Another really useful tool, just so that everyone knows that it exists and it's really exciting. Again, I think it's exciting. You don't have to. Is if you are on our homepage and go down to this tools for research and click on full text articles on the web, there's this really great browser extension called Libkey Nomad that will do something really cool. And I'm going to show you in Wikipedia. If anyone's wondering, the keyword of the day is self-determination theory. So when you have this browser extension, it'll pop up when you're on a page. It doesn't do it for all pages, but it does it with a great number of them. You'll see this little thing pop up called provided by TCS Education System. Why this is really fun is because now when you scroll down, and Wikipedia, I like to use as my example, is it will look at the DOIs of these references, and if we have access to them, or if there's a way for us to get access to them, it will have this little button now pop up with article link or download the PDF. So if I were to click on article link, it's going to try to track down the article. And if we have access to it, it takes you right there. And if you click download article, it'll just download the article theoretically for you. So it's really great because every once in a while you might go to a website or go to like a specific journal without going through the library first. Libkey Nomad can help you get access to it so that you don't see, or if you see that $30 or $60 for an article screen, it can help you get back to it if it's offered through the library. So it can be a really awesome tool, and I like to make sure everyone knows about it because, again, it is a major lifesaver. The other fun tool that we have access to is browsing. And browsing, I clicked the wrong link, of course. If you are going to use it, it's going to be under using the library and journals. And what this does is it lets you search for a for specific journals, and then it lets you browse the individual issues of that journal. So it's sort of a long way to do research, but it's also kind of fun, especially if you want to just read what's going on within a profession. And since every discipline tends to have its favored favored journals that you'll see that are very popular, it's a really great way to see what's going on within the field, what's being published, what's going, and a good way to stay current. And it lets you go back. This was a bad journal example because it looks like it ceased to be published after 2010. So probably not a great one for staying current, but it is fun. It also lets you browse by subjects. So you can go through social science and behavioral science. And this is a really broad subject category. But what is really kind of exciting is you can click this journal link here, and it will pop up the most popular or most cited journals within a given discipline. So you'll notice here that the Journal of Political Economy in all of social and behavioral science seems to be the most widely cited, but you can actually narrow it down to in your subjects here. So if I go like to psychology, for example, it will, one, show me everything that might be popular in psychology, and I can get down even further if I'm interested in like cognition and perception. I can see then the most widely cited journals or the most active journals within a specific discipline. So again, kind of fun. I like to say this is similar to the experience that you would get being able to walk the stacks of a giant old school library where you randomly find journals on the shelf and read them. This provides a somewhat more digital version of that experience. For anyone who's curious, in library land, we call that kind of discovery serendipitous discovery. And it's just an exciting word because I love the word serendipitous. And with that really like brief and quick overview of everything, I want to just leave a couple of minutes so anyone can ask questions and I can try to demonstrate and hope that everything works the way I would plan for it to work.
Thank you so much, David. I don't think we've missed questions in the chat. We do see a lot of thank yous, and this is awesome and helpful, so we all appreciate it. If anyone does want to type questions into the chat, we're looking at those, or if you want to come off mute, and please feel free to ask in person.
Hi, David. My name is Dr. Crowley, and I just have a quick question. I apologize if I missed it when you spoke earlier. I know there's an opportunity to email the librarians. However, kind of drawing on my own experience as a graduate student, sometimes it's helpful to have an opportunity to meet with them and sort of do some brainstorming, especially if we're having trouble coming up with keywords or phrases to search for. So is there a way that students can set up a time to do that?
Yeah, so that's under the Meet My Librarians here. We call it Meet My Librarians, and then it tells you, it gives you this page, and then you just click the Press Me for Help, and it takes you to the calendar to make the appointment with us.
Excellent. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
I've got a quick question. I know you went over this, so I apologize. I kind of blanked on it. But I know you mentioned like the lib key. Can you show me how to access that one more time?
Yeah, of course. So if you go to the library website, the easiest way to get to that tool for the browser extension is Tools for Research, full text articles on the web, and then it'll pop up on the screen here. And if you click on LibKey Nomad, it's going to take you to the download page. And you would just, oh, looks like they changed their URL. So thank you for your question, or else I would have missed that. Well, I'm going to have to fix that. So what that is, if you go to this page, because it's incorrect at this moment, and you scroll down, you'll see download Nomad. That should take you to the page to download it here. But by this time tomorrow, that will have been fixed. So it will take you right to this download page, and you'll notice that it does work on everything. Something I didn't mention, but I should have, is that Apple has recently made some updates to Safari that makes it not play well with a lot of library websites. So if you do use Safari and you are noticing issues, first try a different browser to see if that fixes it. And if it doesn't, then email the library to see if maybe there's something going on that we need to look at more in depth. But just as a warning, Safari isn't playing nicely with others right now.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Hey, David, this is Dr. Dixon. Hey, I just stuck in the chat. I have LibKey on my computer. So I stuck in the chat the link to LibKey Nomad, at least for the web store for Chrome, if anyone needs it.
That's awesome.
Oh, hello, David. Can you hear me?
I can.
I have a question. I was trying to get an article that was going to a different site, and it said that I needed to put in my my information. So I put in my actual email and password, but it wouldn't go through. What would I do in that case?
So without seeing the specific resource that you're pointing to, If it's like one of our websites and it's asking you to log in, normally it's probably asking for your TCSPP username and password. If it's not, send us a link or send us a link at Library Help so that we can take a look at it. So we can get a little bit more specific in our help with the next steps, because if it's an article that you need, we might be able to just create an interlibrary loan request for it.
Okay, because I believe it was ProQuest at that time. And that's who it was from, ProQuest.
And if my question would be, in that case, did you go to ProQuest by itself or did you go through the library to get there first?
Through the library.
In that case, that would be just email us at Library Help at the Chicago School with the information about the article that you were trying to access so that we can investigate further.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I do want to be respectful of time as it is 3 after. And just a note on Chicago School links and passwords and everything. Do know that if you have things bookmarked with a current Chicago School password and you have updated it because it requires you to do so in every, I think it's 90 days or something like that, that could be an issue too. So remember to clear your cache, clear your cookies, all that good stuff if you've recently changed your Chicago School password, and see if that's a good first round. So anyone with one last question, or we can call it a night. Okay, I think we will make it a night. Thank you so much, David Sibley. We appreciate your time and efforts. If you ever want to come back, we would love to have you. Best of luck with your program and doctoral pursuit. And with that being said, have a great evening and cheers to the fall 1 term start. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, David.